Chance Dorland, and welcome to the Marmot's Hole podcast, brought to you by KoreaFM.net, an online radio station featuring independent musicians and original podcast content from the Korean Peninsula. And of course, I'm joined here each episode by Robert Koehler, a magazine editor here in Seoul who for years operated the Marmot's Hole blog at rjkoehler.com. And Rob, the last time we spoke was at our live podcast event for the Seoul Book and Culture Club, which was a really fun time and got a lot of downloads after I uploaded the full audio of the event as a podcast. Hint, hint, hint. You can check that out. But that was some time ago. And it's been raining a lot. Have you been going out and getting pictures of that? I mean, your big thing now is photography. Have you been getting pictures of all the rain?
Yeah, I'm not really big into disaster porn, but I do like the rain though. I love rainy cityscapes and kind of the atmosphere that the rain generates. Even in the Bukchon area, where I work. Seeing the rain, falling off the hanok eaves, and people walking around with hanbok and umbrellas, walking through the alleyways. It's quite nice. Plus, I do like the Blade Runner kind of atmosphere in the downtown areas. That it's quite atmospheric, and it's a lot of fun. There's plenty of fun things to do in the rain.
Today, of course, we're talking about that new slogan that's come out of the ROK, which will be a great discussion because you've been here 20 years. You've seen a lot of different slogans come and go. And now, after I Seoul You, we have a new one, Creative Korea. So let me just briefly introduce this. Basically, the Korea Times reports that the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism announced earlier this week Korea's new national brand, Creative Korea, as well as a logo inspired by the national flag. The ROK, of course, has had a few earlier slogans, including the most notable Dynamic Korea, dating back to 2002, around the time of the World Cup, as well as tourism brands, Korea Sparkling, back in 2007, Korea Be Inspired in 2010, and Imagine Your Korea in 2014. Now, this time around, this new slogan and logo were created following actually some nationwide polling the government conducted. And they asked, I guess what kind of words people thought were good to represent Korea. They spent about $3 million on the project, which we'll get to a little bit later. But the poll data showed that creativity, passion, and harmony, those were the three main keywords that apparently best identify South Korea. And the government insists, and I stress insists, that they listen to opinions from local as well as foreign experts before deciding on Creative Korea. So that's the basic info. We'll get to a few other details and look at some of the stuff that I just mentioned a little bit later. But Rob, what's your reaction to all this? It's all new, but even today there's been a lot of new reports on this. People don't really seem satisfied with this.
Yeah, well, I mean, the logo itself just came out, so obviously there's if you look at the news, there's a lot of complaining from at least from certain quarters. The Ministry of Culture seems a little defensive right now. This might be a case of people just needing time to get used to the new slogan. Me personally, I don't hate it.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of described it to people. I'll get to actually a description that I already gave that was in the Korea Times, but the way I described it to some people in the last couple of days is that it's not a slam dunk. It's not horrible. It's like a B-, but when you have a slogan, you want it to be flashy or catchy or however you want to describe that. And say what you will about this, it's not that. I mean, this is supposed to be a slogan to catch people's attention. It definitely doesn't do that.
Maybe not, but at the same time, it does roll off the tongue rather easily. Creative Korea, that works. It definitely represents at least what this government, wants Korea's image to be. The color scheme is nice. It's designed in a way that you can, use images or other words in the logo design. So, Yeah, I mean, it does have some things going for it. Obviously, the big quote unquote scandal anyway now is that one of the opposition lawmakers has claimed that the new slogan is ripped off from the French. I think they're the French. I don't know what the French call their investment promotion board, but yeah, the French promotion board uses the creative France slogan in the logo, and I think there's been some claims that the new Creative Korea logo rips off the French one. The Ministry of Culture categorically denies that, and I read an interview with the head of the, I guess what you would call the steering committee for this for the new slogan. And he denies it as well, and explains why the Korean slogan is different from the French one. So when you look at it at first, yeah, it does look somewhat similar.
Well, in all fairness, it literally is creative insert country name, and then the same thing for Korea.
Right. Although if you listen to the ministry or reading the interview. They'll point out that a lot of entities around the world use the word creative in their slogan. That's ironically enough, the use of the word creative is not very creative, but I don't find that much of a problem.
Let me read actually something that's appeared on the English media side of things. I like to kind of refer to this as like a Vanilla Ice situation. The ding, 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 ding. Like, right. That was the big thing back in the 90s, and now it's this huge joke. But this is really what we're talking about here.
That was David Bowie, right?
Yeah. Well, so it was the Under Pressure, and then Vanilla Ice with the Ice Ice Baby.
Right.
Yeah. And I drove a Ford Tempo in high school, so that was what was in the music video. This is really connected to my life in Iowa. But forget that. The Culture Ministry, they issued this statement. They dispute the accusation, as you've mentioned. They say that they'd already used the colors in many government slogans and campaigns, and that the word, creative is not something that can be exclusively used by a certain government. And I think to a certain extent that is true. But could you imagine if they just did like I Heart Korea? Like, I mean, people would be like blatantly, okay, that's New York's thing. And you see that like other crappy cities in the world will use that and it'll be like a rip-off. But, a country cannot emulate a really popular slogan from New York City. And they really shouldn't be doing something that exists in very popular Europe. So
yeah, but it's not like it's the French national slogan. It's the French, what do they call it? Their investment promotion board. I mean, it's
used to promote French businesses.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not the same.
But think about this. This was just unveiled this week. How long did it take for people to find this? They spent $3 million. They didn't see this coming.
And it took a year.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at the same time, that may be so. But again, the ministry and the committee said, they looked at a whole bunch of foreign examples, and I guess they were aware of this and said, no, look, the design is, sufficiently different that they don't think it's a problem. And,
yeah, there's an extra ding in the ding ding.
Well, not just an extra ding in the ding ding. The fonts are different. The tones are different. I mean, yeah.
The country's name is different.
Well, you can argue that look, they're both red and blue. But I mean, look, the French flag's red and blue, the Korean flag's red and blue. Hey. Again, it doesn't really trouble me. Like I said, I've seen a lot worse slogans.
That's the thing with this, is that it's a shame because I feel like they may have learned a lesson, and not that the same people were working on ISOU that were working on Creative Korea, but I think just generally they learned in this country a lesson that something really weird might not be a slam dunk with people. That's what ISOU told us. So they went with something that I think is relatively safe. I think Creative Korea is very, very, very safe.
And plus, they also have to take an input from, they ran surveys and they gathered opinions from the public. So, I mean, which is a great thing to do, but it does sometimes limit your your options.
Yeah,
right?
let's talk about that. That was something I wanted to bring up because you mentioned that earlier. ISOLU was a popular vote on a website. They got all these suggestions, and then they limited it to 3. It was like ISOLU, Soline, and then, God, I forget what the other one was. ISOLU, Soline, and something else. I remember I did a report on this. Soulmate, there we are. Even though I thought Soulmate was pretty easy out of those 3, the people that I spoke to on the street, a lot of people were like, none of them are that great. Soulmate's good, but it's just so obvious, like it's overdone. It sounds like a blog. And truthfully, if you look for blogs, I'm sure there are a lot of them that are named Soulmate. But
it was a safe option, though.
Yeah, it was a safe option. But they allowed people to choose.
I believe that was actually in terms of the online voting, I believe that was actually the most popular one. What ended up happening is on the last day, the way the voting worked with that was, there was the online poll, then there was the actual, the voting event, which was, and on the, what's the word I'm looking for?
Red carpet gala ceremony with roses.
No, trust me, it wasn't that. It was cold. It was a very cold day. And we all gathered outside in front of Seoul City Hall, and, there was a vote there, and also an experts committee of I think about 10 people, including one foreigner. Yeah,
so it's like these reality TV shows where it's like America decides and the judges decide.
And that's really where the ISOLU got came out ahead. And I think a lot of that was due to the groups that came up with the slogans, right? They gave presentations, and I think the ISOLU presentation was able to swing the vote.
Yeah, this whole idea of allowing people to choose. You nuanced it. You showed that, okay, it wasn't just a popular vote. There were presentations, there were judges, blah, blah, blah. But it didn't go so well with ISOLU. It was really, right off the bat, people had a problem with it, just like we're seeing right now with Creative Korea. And the very obvious connection between the two is that it involved some sort of popular opinion. Is that necessary? I mean, marketing is not a skill that is just innate to your average Joe. I mean, people might not necessarily choose something that is good. They might choose something they think is good or something that's catchy. But when you have a slogan, it's just like anything else. It has to be designed with a certain purpose.
Right. Well, I mean, usually with the slogan design and stuff, they usually get experts to do that sort of thing, even if
and they pay them $3 million.
Yeah, I mean, that's another issue, but yeah. And plus there's another 3.5 billion won that's been earmarked to spend in the future for this too.
The promotion of the new slogan.
To promote it, and they're going to use it in during the Rio Olympics if anybody shows up. And
yeah, what a cluster F that's going to be.
What a cluster that is. And the Pyeongchang Olympics, and yes.
But yeah, just to go back on that topic, do you think for the next whatever it is, if it's an individual city, Daegu or Busan, or if they just decide to scrap this and they go with something else, maybe should we lay off the popular opinion for a while?
I'm of two minds about this. I think I do think it's a good thing to, if you're coming up with a brand to represent the nation, it's not a bad thing to get the nation involved in, determining what that brand or what that slogan is. But yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made that branding, PR, promotion, I mean, it requires experts. And there are individuals, there are companies that get paid lots and lots of money to come up with this shit. I'm sure. Did you watch Mad Men?
Oh yeah, I'm one of those lame people that doesn't like Mad Men. I watched like the first season. I wasn't in love with it, and then I tried to watch more because people were like, "Oh, you got to get into it." But I've watched some.
Look, there's no shame in that. I mean, it's one of those shows that are the people I like to call our cultural betters. They love it and they write about it in the Atlantic or the New Yorker or Harper's Bazaar, and then but nobody actually watches it, right? But anyway, the point is, I mean, there are whole industries that are built around coming up with brands, coming up with slogans, right? It's not something that anybody can do. I mean, I work obviously, I work in a publishing company, and copywriting is hard. It's not, it's not an easy thing. Now that being said, if you farm it out to experts, or you're not guaranteed to get a good result either. I mean, I think the Korea Sparkling one, that took a lot of shit when that was released, and they got, and they had a lot of experts working on that, including, I believe, what was it, Simon Anhalt, right?
Oh, you would know more about this. I just know that Korea Sparkling, is still talked today about how that was not a good choice. and you still see it because there's so many slogans that are coming in and out. And maybe just as as someone who grew up in the United States, I don't notice the slogans that we have because it's just, it blends into just, all the Americana around me. But you still see all these slogans. They're still on taxi cabs. They're on walls.
Right. And even like, I Soul You, or other, high, I guess, I'm not sure exactly how High Soul got created, but even with slogans that are, that involve the public, I mean, there's a lot of expert opinion, expert, advice, a lot of expert contributions being made too. So it's not like it's just a whole bunch of, dragging guys off the street and giving them, pens, or sitting them in front of, Adobe Illustrator and tell them to go to work. It's not quite like that, but yeah, I mean, I do think there are limits, but I think it's especially so when you're coming up with slogans that are in a language that's not spoken in the country, that's not spoken by the majority of the public. I mean, I think that's where the problem is. I mean, if you were doing a Korean language slogan and then asking the public to, work on that, I think you would get a much better result.
Yeah, that's a very good point to bring up. Needs to be brought up more. Pretty much everything that we talk about, it often just boils down to language. And I will give Korea a very big benefit of the doubt when it comes to this. I understand it's not the language of the country.
Right. I mean, okay, it's not. I mean, the analogy I'm about to make is not perfect. I'll admit, because I mean, obviously, a lot of Koreans do speak English, and a lot of Koreans study English in school. But it in a way, it's like if. I don't know.
Like if the U.S. had to choose a bunch of slogans out of Spanish and they just sounded ridiculous.
Right, exactly. If, for example, if Americans were choosing their own Spanish language slogan, or I don't know, coming up with a Korean language slogan, right? I mean, we wouldn't know, and it's it's just I do think it's problematic. And you're setting yourself up to get some pretty odd results. Now, how what's the answer to that? I don't know. Because again, it's not a perfect analogy. Obviously, English is it's the international language. And if you're going to come up with a slogan that, is usable internationally, you're going to need to do it in English. But yeah, I really don't, I do think there's a problem with that.
Something else I want to probably make our final topic of discussion before we say goodbye. You mentioned this a little bit earlier. I'd love to have you expand on this. I think you would lay it out much better than myself. So President Park Geun-hye has been doing a lot of things, I guess you'd call them creatively, or trying to brand things, with the words creative. So I'd like for you to kind of expand on that, because that's something that's been brought up in the coverage is, okay, this makes sense because forget all the polling and all that stuff, but there are a lot of creative initiatives in the government right now. But on the other side of the coin, and I think correctly so, it's been brought up that, okay, but President Park Geun-hye is a one-term president. It's a limited system. Only run once, only win once, and then you're done. The next president might not be going through in the same way. And so you don't want to have to change your slogan every 5 years. So maybe it's not a good idea. But I want you to kind of just expand on that. But first off, as I teased a little earlier in the conversation, I got quoted in a Korea Times article on this, and I want to read what I told them and just kind of use that to push the conversation to focus on President Park Geun-hye and her administration's use of creative. Something that I know, good intentions, but I really think was probably a waste of time to begin with. So, speaking on Korea, this is what I was quoted in the Korea Times. Hardworking, absolutely. Technologically advanced, of course. And I'm speaking about Korea. I often describe living in Korea as living in the future to my friends and family back home. But I don't pretend Korean students aren't forced to memorize facts and figures for tests that require no imagination whatsoever to get a perfect score, and that being successful here often boils down to who you know and what university you went to. I've interviewed countless Koreans for different projects I've worked on, and they'll be the first to tell you their country needs more creativity. And now the easiest way to show how much creativity South Korea needs is by reading the country's new slogan. So, could you talk about all the creative initiatives that President Park Geun-hye has been pushing forward, which I think is kind of like, one step forward, two steps backward, because once again, it's just something that I don't think really describes the country.
Yeah, see, I tend to take a very different view on that. First of all, I think with the Park Geun-hye administration, I think it is right that if you're going to come up with a slogan, you don't want one that's tied, or that seems to be tied to a signature policy initiative of the current government. And yeah, I mean, with the Park Geun-hye administration, one of her signature policy initiatives is creative economy. Now, what that means to the way the government uses that term is maybe not exactly what you would necessarily understand the word creative to mean. And when they talk about it, what they're talking about is for the most part using information technology merging information technology with other existing industries to try to create new engines of growth. So yeah, that's what they mean by that. And
not like that thing where the light bulb pops up above your brain and you're like, oh my gosh, I have this brilliant idea. More of bringing things together.
Right. Now, that being said, no, you said you don't think of Korea as a particularly creative country. I disagree with that. And here I'm mostly quoting from a post. I think the Ask Korean blog.
Sure.
Now, he wrote what I thought was an excellent post on this, which is, describing how, and by the way, I mean, you're not the only one. I mean, as you pointed out, a lot of Koreans will say, oh, Korea needs to be more creative. Koreans need to be more creative. And usually with a lot of complaints about the education system.
Yeah.
But, his argument was basically Koreans already are very creative. It's just we tend to look at creative, at least a lot of Westerners tend to look at creativity in a very narrow, with a very narrow focus. I mean, for example, a company like Samsung is able to keep up with a company like Apple, because it's very creative in terms of the way the
way it creatively copies Apple products for the Korean market.
Well, it also works the other way too, but no, it does because it's for example, its manufacturing processes are some of the best in the world, and you don't get manufacturing processes like that without a great deal of creativity. We've talked about Korea being the world's biggest shipbuilding. Now, granted, the shipbuilding industry is having serious problems right now, but again, you don't become the world's biggest shipbuilder without a great deal of a great deal of creativity. I mean, yeah, everybody talks about the iPhone. Nobody talks about Korean container ships that are some of the most innovative ships in the world. Nobody talks about that. Because I think we tend to fetishize certain creative realms while not appreciating the creativity that go in other realms.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I think there's definitely a case to be made along those lines. Sure.
Right. Plus, there's also other things too. I mean, for example, obviously, we've had one, Korean novelist, recently win the Man Booker International Prize, but also a lot of Korean artists are now getting recognized overseas. Korean industrial designers are some of the best in the world. There's a lot of Koreans that are doing excellent, creative design work, not just in Korea, but also when they go to overseas, and are working for overseas design firms. there's a lot of creativity there. I mean, to be honest, you don't become the world's. I still think Korea is the world's 13th largest economy. Again, you don't become a major international trading power like Korea without a lot of creativity. Now, granted, there are areas of creativity that Korea is maybe lagging behind. Obviously, and the government would be the first to tell you this. I mean, this is why they're trying to pump so much money into activating the activating the venture, what do they call it, the startup.
Yeah, they want Seoul in South Korea to be a startup hub, the startup hub for Asia.
Right, but the reason why the startup culture in Korea is not working, I don't think it's because there's a lack of creativity or lack of ideas. I think it's because of the structure of the Korean economy, where it's all where it's so heavily chaebol, it's so with the large conglomerates dominate the economy to such an extent that there's very little room for startups or small and medium-sized companies. So, it's not that there's no creativity or there's no ideas. It's just there are structural issues with the economy that are holding back, that sector of the economy. So, I don't think Koreans are not creative. I just, I think to be honest, when I hear, Westerners and Americans in particular make that criticism, I find it somewhat annoying. But
F you, Chance, kicking me in the crotch, Rob.
No. It's not necessarily. It's to be, as you pointed out, a lot of Koreans talk about it, and when Koreans bring it up, it kind of annoys me too. I'm like, I think there's a certain fetishization going here of the American tech industry. And actually something, in the Korean, again, from the Ask Korean blog, did point out something that's very interesting, is that, for all the creativity of the American tech sector, and to take nothing away from it, I mean, look, I mean, Google, Apple, Microsoft, these companies have in many ways changed the way in which the world works. And I mean, that's something that obviously few Korean tech companies have done. Even Samsung. I mean, they're very creative at they're very good at doing what they do, but they haven't launched any products really that have changed the way in which the world functions.
Yeah, Korea makes things better. They're excellent at making things better, but not necessarily coming up with brand new concepts.
Maybe not. Although, again, that might change. I mean, again, like there's certain, maybe, especially in things like, what's the word I'm looking for? Monitors and display technology. I mean, we'll and obviously biotech. We might see things coming out of here that, that really are game changers. But again, we'll see. But, for all the creativity going on in Silicon Valley, it actually creates very, very little employment. The amount of people working for Google, the amount of people working for, Apple, pales in comparison to the type of employment that Samsung does.
Samsung is, this guy who's writing the book on Samsung, I saw one of his presentations. Is it like a quarter or more of the South Korean economy?
Yeah, it's huge. If you take a look at, Samsung, LG, these huge tech companies, even if they're not, creating the next iPhone, they are employing a load of people, more so than their American counterparts in a country that's not, that's much, much smaller. So, now the thing that TK didn't say, and I think the argument could be made that kind of corporate structure may hurt Korean companies in the long run.
Yeah, not sustainable, maybe.
I mean, again, we don't, I'm not an economist, and more to the point, I haven't really looked into the specifics there to comment. But yeah, I mean, I do think there's a lot of creativity there, and I think I don't think necessarily that I don't I know there's a lot of people who look at creative Korea and say that it's ironic, but I don't think that. There's also another thing. I mean, also if you take a company, and again, not to rip off TK, but nobody ever says Germans aren't creative.
I lived in Germany for a year. I would argue that in many ways they're not, but in a completely different way than Korea.
Right, but I mean, again, you look at the German economy, right? I mean, again, they do a lot of things really well. They do extremely, extremely well, right? Cars, high end optical equipment.
Got really good at fooling air pollution standards as of late.
Yeah, well, to keep it positive, industrial equipment. I mean, they're very, very good at what they do, and they're very creative in terms of coming up with industrial processes and industrial design. But yeah, I mean, you don't see you don't see German companies making the next iPhone necessarily.
Yeah, in a very stereotypical German way, which I
not to play it's a race card here. I do think there is a certain amount of kind of kind of not soft racism, but I do think a lot of it is East Asians they're monotonous, what's the automatons, they no creativity, they just copy what other what white countries do, and maybe make it more efficient, and but they don't come up with their own ideas, they can't think for themselves. I think there's still a lot of that kind of racist thinking going on, and I try to avoid it.
Well, yeah, interesting food for thought. I'm not going to say that doesn't exist. I don't know.
It definitely exists. You hear it a lot, and I think to some extent, I think a lot of Koreans buy into it.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I agree. I think with what you're trying to say is that if like Germany came out with this slogan, "Creative Germany," I don't know that I would be as against it as I am about Korea. For different reasons, obviously two very different countries. But I'll agree. There are certain stereotypes. I don't know if I would call it soft racism or Diet Coke racism, whatever you want to call it. But no, you bring up very, very valid points. And that's why I specifically wanted to ask this final question of you because I knew you would do that. So, we'll see how this goes. This is basically like the first week. And I gotta give credit where credit is due with ISOLU. They stuck to their guns, and it's definitely here to stay. I wonder if Creative Korea might not be able to last. It seems that Creative Korea being a much safer choice, like ISOLU was just like weird. People are like, wow, that's strange. For better or for worse, but Creative Korea is not that. And so with the amount of opposition Creative Korea has received in such a short amount of time for what relatively seems like a safe choice, it'll be interesting to see how this lasts into the future.
Yeah, I think a lot of the opposition, I mean, I don't know. I think some of the initial opposition, I think there is a political element to it.
Yeah, that the person who brought up this Creative France thing, that was an opposition lawmaker.
Right. Although she is apparently a design and PR expert. So I mean, it's not.
Oh, tip of the cap. Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, she's not unknowledgeable about what she's talking about. But I mean, there is, I think, a political aspect to it too. We'll see if it takes. I mean, again, that got brought up today, and it's just been a couple of days since the slogan got the slogan got released. So sometimes it takes the public a bit of time to get used to it. I mean, it is pretty safe, and even after the next even after this administration is history, I think it does have some degree of staying power.
Yeah, the next president isn't going to be like, get rid of every creative thing that we've. It's like some things will continue.
Yeah. That being said, one of the things that kind of annoys me is that and this is not just a Korea thing. It happens in a lot of different countries. It's everything is branding, and then somebody comes in and is like, oh, we need a new brand, and people are wasting tons and tons of money on coming up with this type of coming up with new brands and new slogans, and In a way, it almost seems like a make work project. So even if it deserves to last, there's no guarantee that it will.
Yeah, I think specifically, you can look from time to time, the last comment, like with High Soul of Asia, I remember specifically they wanted to get rid of that because China was against that because they didn't want the Soul of Asia to be outside of China. So they were having a hard time advertising to Chinese tourists, which is like the biggest chunk of tourism that comes to Korea. And then, this Dynamic Korea, not the greatest slogan. Also, it's more than 10 years old. It's with the Old World Cup. The Olympics are going to be here in 2 years. So, I think the case can be made that maybe it was the time to come up with something, as was the case with I Soul U after High Soul of Asia was not being used in China. But generally, I think what you just mentioned is definitely the case a lot of the time. And I see that a lot in South Korea. Time to get a new phone, time to do this, do that. I think that's definitely something that's present in Korean culture. And of course, that exists many places, obviously in the United States as well. But I think that's a very good point to bring up. So, Rob, of course, thank you for your expertise on this. You're almost 20 years here in South Korea. Also, of course, I'll talk with you for the next episode sometime here in the near future.
Well, I'll talk to you next time.